The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the general store, and Penelope Jensen pressed her gloved hand against the rough wooden frame to steady herself, grateful that the jolting journey from Salt Lake City to Snake River, Idaho, had finally ended. Through the dusty window, she could see a collection of weathered buildings lining a wide dirt street, mountains rising in the distance like silent guardians over this frontier settlement. It was August 1878, and the late summer heat pressed down on everything with an insistence that made her wounds ache beneath the carefully pinned layers of her traveling dress. The driver opened the door and extended a calloused hand to help her down. Penelope descended carefully, each movement measured to avoid jostling her shoulders where the burns still sent sharp reminders of the night 3 weeks ago that had changed everything. She had wrapped them as best she could before leaving Utah, but the long journey had taken its toll. Beneath the high collar of her gray wool dress and the shawl she kept clutched around her despite the heat, the bandages had shifted and loosened. "You, Miss Jensen?" a gruff voice called from the shade of the store's awning. Penelope turned to see a thick-set man with a generous belly straining against his vest buttons. His mustache drooped past his jowls, and his eyes held the calculating look of someone accustomed to measuring people by their usefulness. "I am," she said, lifting her chin with more confidence than she felt. "Horace Millbrook. I run the general store here. Got your letter saying you was coming to marry Owen Jenkins. He should be here shortly. Sends his regrets he could not meet the stage himself, but there was trouble with cattle breaking through a fence line this morning." Penelope nodded, her mouth suddenly dry. Owen Jenkins. The man she had agreed to marry through a series of carefully worded letters, each one representing a lifeline thrown across hundreds of miles. She had been honest in her correspondence mostly. She had told him she was 22 years old, unmarried, possessed of a sound constitution, and a willingness to work hard. She had told him she could read and write, cook and sew, manage a household, and tend a garden. She had told him she was seeking a new start in a place where the past could not follow. She had not told him about the burns, or about why she bore them. The driver deposited her trunk beside her with a thud that sent up a small cloud of dust. Penelope fumbled in her reticule for coins to pay him, wincing as the movement pulled at her damaged skin. She caught Millbrook watching her, his eyes narrowing slightly, but he said nothing. "You can wait inside where it is cooler," he offered, gesturing toward the store. "Got some chairs in the back. Might be more comfortable than standing in this sun." "Thank you, but I will wait here," Penelope said. She wanted to see Owen Jenkins the moment he arrived, wanted to gauge his character from how he sat a horse and carried himself before he saw her watching. It was a small advantage, but she had learned that small advantages sometimes made all the difference. She did not have to wait long. Within 10 minutes, a rider appeared at the far end of the street, moving at an easy canter that spoke of a man comfortable in the saddle. As he drew closer, Penelope studied him with the same careful attention she had once given to reading the weather in her father's face, trying to predict whether the evening would bring peace or violence. Owen Jenkins was tall. She could see that even mounted. He sat straight in the saddle, shoulders square, hat pulled low against the sun. As he reined in his horse and dismounted in one fluid motion, she saw he was probably in his late 20s, with sun-darkened skin and dark brown hair that curled slightly where it touched his collar. His jaw was strong, shadowed with a day's worth of stubble, and his eyes were a startling blue-gray that seemed to take in everything at once. Those eyes found hers and held for a moment before he looked away, removing his hat in a gesture of respect. "Miss Jensen? Mr. Jenkins." She was pleased her voice came out steady. "Owen, please." He turned the hat in his hands, and she realized with some surprise that he was nervous. "I apologize for not meeting your stage. We had some trouble this morning." Mr. Millbrook explained, "It is quite all right." They stood looking at each other for a moment that stretched just past comfortable. Penelope saw him taking in her appearance, the careful way she held herself, the shawl wrapped tight despite the heat. His expression gave nothing away, but something in his eyes softened. "I have a wagon just there," he said, gesturing toward a sturdy-looking buckboard tied in front of the saloon. My ranch is about 5 miles out. It is not much, but the house is solid and there is good water. I run about 200 head of cattle, have a few horses, make enough to live on with a bit left over. He was giving her an accounting, she realized, letting her know what kind of life she was stepping into. It was more consideration than she had expected. That sounds fine, she said. Owen picked up her trunk, as though it weighed nothing, and carried it to the wagon, securing it in the back. Then he returned and offered his arm. Penelope hesitated for only a moment before taking it, grateful for the support as they walked the short distance. The ride had exhausted her more than she wanted to admit, and the burns throbbed with each step. He helped her onto the wagon seat with a gentle hand, then climbed up beside her and took up the reins. As they pulled away from the store, Penelope was aware of Millbrook watching them go, and of several other faces peering from windows and doorways. A new mail-order bride was clearly an event of interest in Snake River. They rode in silence for the first mile. The only sounds the creak of the wagon, the steady clip of the horses' hooves, and the buzz of insects in the tall grass beside the road. The Snake River Valley spread out around them, golden with late summer grass dotted with sage and occasional stands of cottonwoods. Mountains rose on either side, and overhead the sky stretched vast and impossibly blue. "It is beautiful," Penelope said softly, surprising herself by speaking first. "It is," Owen agreed. "Harsh sometimes, especially in winter, but there's nowhere else I would rather be." He glanced at her. "The house has 2 bedrooms. I want you to know that. You will have your own space, and there are no expectations until you are ready. If you are ever ready. I am looking for a partner, Miss Jensen, not a servant." The knot of tension in Penelope's chest loosened slightly. "I appreciate your saying so, and please call me Penelope." "Penelope." He said her name carefully, as though testing the shape of it. "That is a fine name." "My mother loved to read," she said. "She named me after a character in a Greek story, the faithful wife who waited." "And are you faithful?" The question was asked lightly, but she sensed the weight behind it. "I keep my promises," she said, "when I make them to people who deserve them kept." He nodded slowly, seeming to understand there was more behind her words than she was saying. "Fair enough." They lapsed into silence again, but it felt more comfortable now. Penelope found herself relaxing slightly, though she kept the shawl clutched around her shoulders. The afternoon sun beat down, and she could feel sweat gathering at her hairline, beneath the tight coil of her dark blonde hair. Owen's ranch came into view as they crested a low hill. The house was a simple structure of weathered wood with a covered porch across the front. Beside it stood a barn, a corral, and a few smaller outbuildings. It was tidy and well maintained, speaking of a man who took pride in what he had built. "Home," Owen said simply. He pulled the wagon up in front of the house and hopped down, then came around to help her. Penelope accepted his hand, but as her feet touched the ground, a wave of dizziness washed over her. She swayed, and suddenly his arm was around her waist, steadying her. "Penelope, are you all right?" She tried to answer, but the world tilted sideways. The last thing she was aware of before darkness claimed her was the feeling of being lifted, of strong arms catching her as she fell. When Penelope woke, she was lying on a bed in a small, neat room. Evening light slanted through a window, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. For a moment she was disoriented, unsure where she was or how she had gotten there. Then memory flooded back, along with a surge of panic. She tried to sit up and gasped at the pain that lanced through her shoulders. Looking down, she realized with horror that someone had removed her dress. She was in her chemise and petticoats, and even those had been loosened. The bandages on her shoulders were visible, stained with seepage from the wounds beneath. "Easy now." Owen's voice came from the doorway. He stood there with a basin of water and clean cloths draped over his arm, his expression concerned but calm. "You fainted. I think from the heat and exhaustion, but when I got you in here and loosened your collar so you could breathe better, I saw the bandages. They need changing, Penelope. Those wounds need proper care. No, she clutched the thin fabric of her chemise. Please, I can do it myself. Can you reach them? He asked gently. Can you see them well enough to clean them properly and apply fresh dressing? She could not, and they both knew it. For 3 weeks she had been doing the best she could, contorting herself in front of mirrors, trying to tend burns that spread across both shoulders and partway down her back. It had been agony, and she knew the wounds were not healing as they should. I will not ask what happened, Owen said, moving slowly into the room and setting the basin on a small table beside the bed. That is your business, and you can tell me or not tell me as you see fit. But I will not stand by and watch you suffer when I can help. I have some experience with burns. One of my hands got caught in a fire 2 years back when the barn caught. I know how to treat them. Tears stung Penelope's eyes. She blinked them back fiercely. You will think differently of me. Why would I think differently of you for being hurt? Because, she swallowed hard, because when people see these, they assume things. They think I must have done something to deserve it. Owen was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low and steady. I grew up with a father who drank. When he drank, he got mean. I have seen enough of how some people treat those weaker than themselves to know that deserving has nothing to do with it. The only thing I would assume about those burns is that someone hurt you and that you were strong enough to get away from them. The tears spilled over then, running down her cheeks in hot tracks. She could not remember the last time someone had offered her simple kindness without wanting something in return. Will you let me help? Owen asked. Penelope nodded, not trusting her voice. She turned slightly, presenting her back to him, and tried not to flinch as his footsteps approached. His hands were careful as he peeled away the soiled bandages, his touch as gentle as she imagined a man could manage. She heard his sharp intake of breath when he saw the full extent of the damage. Christ, he muttered. I'm sorry, Penelope. I'm so sorry someone did this to you. It was my father, she heard herself say. He found me reading a book he thought was unsuitable, said I was getting ideas above my station, that I needed to be taught obedience. He heated a poker in the fire. The words hung in the air between them. Owen said nothing, but she felt the momentary stillness in his hands, the tension that ran through him like a struck wire. Did you kill him? The question was asked matter-of-factly, without judgment. No. But I waited until he passed out from drinking, and then I left, took what money I had saved and bought a ticket on the first stage heading west. I answered your advertisement from Salt Lake City. Good, Owen said firmly. I am glad you got out, and for what it is worth, you are safe here. I do not hold with men who raise their hands to women, and I do not hold with anyone who would burn another human being. If your father ever shows his face around here, he will regret it. He returned to his work then, cleaning the burns with a solution that stung but felt cleaner than anything Penelope had managed on her own. His touch remained gentle, professional, and she found herself relaxing despite the intimacy of the situation. These are healing, he said after a while. Not as fast as they should, but there is no infection that I can see. That is good. We will need to keep them clean and covered for another few weeks at least. I have some salve that will help. He worked in silence for several more minutes, applying the salve with careful fingers, then wrapping her shoulders in clean bandages. When he was finished, he helped her ease her chemise back up, then moved away to give her privacy. There is a nightgown on the chair there, he said, his back turned. One of my mother's. She passed some years back, but I kept some of her things. Take your time getting settled. I will be in the kitchen when you're ready. You should eat something. He left then, closing the door softly behind him. Penelope sat on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking slightly. She felt vulnerable and exposed in a way that had nothing to do with her state of undress. She had revealed the worst thing about herself, the shameful secret she had carried like a stone in her chest, and Owen had responded with nothing but kindness and practical care. It was more than she had dared hope for. She dressed slowly in the nightgown, a soft white cotton thing that was clearly old but well maintained. It smelled faintly of lavender and sunshine. Then she wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and made her way to the kitchen. Owen stood at the stove, stirring something in a pot. The kitchen was simple but clean, with a good-sized table and chairs, shelves lined with dishes and supplies, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. He glanced up when she entered. "Beef stew," he said. "Not fancy, but it is hot and filling. Sit down, you need to eat." Penelope sat, and a moment later he placed a bowl in front of her, along with a thick slice of bread and butter. The smell made her stomach clench with sudden hunger. She could not remember the last proper meal she had eaten. Owen sat across from her with his own bowl, and for a while they ate in companionable silence. The stew was good, rich, and savory, and Penelope felt strength returning to her with each bite. "Tell me about the ranch," she said after a while. "Like, what will my duties be?" Owen looked at her thoughtfully. "Well, I suppose that depends on what you are comfortable doing. I am not looking to work you to death, Penelope. I manage well enough on my own, though I will admit the house could use a woman's touch. I can cook, but my repertoire is limited. I can mend, but not well. The vegetable garden is more weeds than vegetables at this point." "I can do all those things," Penelope said. "I am not afraid of work." "I know that," Owen said. "Anyone who survived what you survived and made it this far is not afraid of work, but you are also still healing. And I do not want you pushing yourself too hard too fast. We have time to figure out how this will work between us." "You're being very kind," Penelope said softly. "I did not expect such kindness." "Kindness is just treating people the way they deserve to be treated," Owen said. "It should not be exceptional. But I suppose in this world it often is." He paused, turning his spoon in his hand. "I will be honest with you, Penelope. I sent for a mail-order bride because I'm tired of being alone. This ranch is a good place, but it is a lonely place. I wanted someone to share it with, someone to talk to at the end of the day, but I want a real marriage, built on respect and partnership, not something forced or false." "I want that too," Penelope said. "I want a chance to build something good." "Then we are agreed." Owen smiled, and it transformed his face, softening the hard lines carved by sun and wind. "We will take our time, get to know each other, and see where it leads." They finished their meal, and Owen insisted on cleaning up while Penelope rested. She did not argue, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. The day had been long and overwhelming, and her body was demanding sleep. "Your room is the one you woke in," Owen said, as she headed toward the hallway. "Mine is across the hall. If you need anything in the night, just call out." "Thank you," Penelope said, "for everything." "No thanks needed. Sleep well." In her room, Penelope climbed into the bed and pulled the quilts up around her. Through the window, she could see stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky, bright and clear, in a way they never were in the city. She could hear Owen moving around in the kitchen, the comfortable sounds of a house settling in for the night. For the first time in months, she felt something that might have been hope. The days that followed fell into a gentle rhythm. Penelope woke each morning to find Owen already up and tending to the cattle and horses. She would dress carefully, make breakfast, and have it waiting when he came in from his chores. They would eat together, talking about small things, learning each other's habits and preferences. After breakfast, Owen would change her bandages, his touch remaining gentle and impersonal even as the burns slowly healed. He never pressed her for more details about what had happened, and she found herself grateful for his restraint. It was enough that he knew, that she did not have to hide or pretend with him. The rest of her days she spent putting the house in order, taking satisfaction in small improvements. She scrubbed floors and washed windows, organized shelves, and mended torn curtains. She tackled the vegetable garden, pulling weeds and coaxing the struggling plants back to health. She baked bread and experimented with new recipes, pleased when Owen praised her cooking. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch as the sun set, watching the sky turn from blue to gold to purple. Sometimes they talked, sharing stories of their pasts. Owen told her about growing up in Missouri, about heading west at 19 to escape his father's violence, about building this ranch from nothing through sheer stubborn determination. Penelope told him about her mother, who had died when she was 12, leaving her alone with a father who grew increasingly bitter and cruel. She told him about the books she had loved, the dreams she had harbored of a different life. She did not tell him everything, but she told him enough. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, and Penelope found she valued these moments as much as the conversations. There was something peaceful about simply being in Owen's presence, about not having to perform or pretend. 3 weeks after her arrival, Owen declared her burns healed enough that she no longer needed daily dressings. "The skin is still tender," he said, "and you will likely always have scars. But the danger of infection has passed, and they just need time now." Penelope felt a strange sense of loss as he stepped back after applying the salve one last time. This daily ritual had become a moment of intimacy between them, a space where she felt cared for in a way she never had before. "Thank you," she said, "for taking such good care of me." Owen's blue-gray eyes met hers. "You do not need to thank me for doing what was right. Still, I am grateful." He nodded, then surprised her by reaching out and tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering for just a moment against her cheek. "You are doing well here, Penelope. I hope you know that. I'm glad you came." Her breath caught. "I am glad I came too." That night, lying in bed, Penelope realized something had shifted. What had started as a practical arrangement, a desperate grab for safety and a new start, was becoming something more. She was developing feelings for Owen, genuine feelings that went beyond gratitude or relief. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. September arrived with cooler temperatures and the first hints of autumn color in the aspens on the mountainsides. The cattle needed to be moved to lower pastures, and Owen hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work. Penelope met them when they came by the house one morning, both young men who treated her with shy respect. "That is Mac and Charlie," Owen explained after they had headed out to begin the day's work. "Good boys, hard workers. They have been helping out during busy seasons for the past year." With the men around during the day, Penelope found herself cooking for 4 instead of 2. She did not mind. It felt good to be useful, to provide something of value. The hands were appreciative of her efforts, always careful to compliment her cooking and thank her for the meals. One evening, after Mac and Charlie had headed back to the bunkhouse they shared on a neighboring ranch, Owen helped Penelope clean up the dinner dishes. It had become a habit of theirs, this time working side by side in the kitchen while they talked about the day. "You are good with them," Owen said as he dried a plate. "Mac especially is usually shy around women, but you put him at ease." "They are sweet boys," Penelope said. "They remind me of students I used to help at the schoolhouse back home, before." She trailed off. "Before your father decided education was dangerous," Owen finished quietly. "Yes." She rinsed another dish, watching the soapy water swirl down the drain. "He thought women should be seen and not heard, that too much learning would give me ideas. He was right about that, at least. Books did give me ideas, ideas that there could be more to life than fear and walking on eggshells." Owen set down the plate he was drying and turned to face her. "Penelope, I want you to know something. You never have to fear me. I know I am a large man, and I know I can seem rough sometimes, but I would cut off my own hand before I raised it to you in anger." She met his eyes, saw the sincerity there, the earnestness. "I know that. I have known it almost from the beginning. You are a good man, Owen Jenkins." "I try to be," he said. "My father showed me what kind of man I did not want to be. That has been its own kind of education." On impulse, Penelope reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. His hand was large and calloused, warm and steady. He looked down at their joined hands, then back up at her, and she saw wonder in his expression. "I am starting to care for you, Churches," she said, the words coming out braver than she felt. "Not just gratitude for what you have done for me, but real caring. I wanted you to know that." Owen's free hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "I have been caring for you since the day you stepped off that stage," he said. "Maybe even before, from your letters. You have a strength in you, Penelope, a core of steel wrapped in grace. I admire that." He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of promise. Penelope felt warmth bloom in her chest, spreading outward until her whole body tingled with it. She kissed him back, her free hand coming up to rest against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. When they parted, both were smiling. "I have wanted to do that for a while now," Owen admitted. "I was hoping you would," Penelope said. That night marked a turning point in their relationship. They were still careful with each other, still taking things slowly, but there was a new ease between them. Owen began finding excuses to touch her as he passed, a hand on the small of her back, fingers brushing hers when they reached for the same item. Penelope began leaning into him when they sat on the porch in the evenings, resting her head against his shoulder. They kissed often, sweet, stolen moments in the kitchen or on the porch, learning the shape and taste of each other. But they did not push beyond that, both content to let things develop at their own pace. October brought the first frost, painting the world in crystal one morning when Penelope woke and looked out her window. She dressed warmly and went to start breakfast, only to find Owen already in the kitchen, looking troubled. "What is wrong?" she asked immediately. "Got word from town," he said. "There is a man asking questions about a woman who matches your description. Came in on the stage yesterday, has been making the rounds of all the establishments." Penelope felt ice settle in her stomach. "My father." "Most likely." Owen's jaw was set in a hard line. "I need to go into town, see what his intentions are. I want you to stay here. Mac and Charlie will be around, and I will leave my rifle with you. Do you know how to shoot?" "Yes," Penelope said. Her father had taught her, ironically, thinking a daughter should know how to defend the homestead. "But Owen, if he has come all this way, he will not simply leave because you ask him to." "I do not intend to ask," Owen said grimly. "I intend to make it very clear that you are under my protection now and that he is not welcome on my land or near you." "He is dangerous when he is angry," Penelope warned. "So am I." Owen pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "I will not let him hurt you again, Penelope. I swear that to you." She clung to him, breathing in his scent of leather and hay and clean sweat. "Be careful, please. Always." He kissed the top of her head, then gently disentangled himself. "Bolt the door after I leave. Do not open it for anyone but me or the hands." Penelope watched from the window as Owen saddled his horse and rode toward town, her heart hammering in her chest. She had known this moment might come, had known her father might try to find her. Men like him did not like losing control, did not like having their property, as he saw it, simply walk away. The morning passed with agonizing slowness. Mac and Charlie came to the house for lunch, and Penelope fed them but said little, too anxious to make conversation. They seemed to sense something was wrong and did not press her. It was mid-afternoon when she heard the sound of horses approaching. Penelope grabbed the rifle Owen had left and went to the window, relief flooding through her when she saw it was Owen returning. But her relief turned to alarm when she realized there were two riders and Owen was leading the second horse, which carried a man who appeared to be unconscious and tied to the saddle. She flung open the door and ran out onto the porch. "Owen, what happened?" Owen dismounted, his expression dark. "This is your father, I assume. He took exception to being told he could not see you. Drew a gun on me in front of half the town. I gave him a choice. Leave peacefully or face the consequences. He chose poorly." Penelope looked at the slumped figure on the second horse and recognized the graying hair, the thick build of her father. "Is he dead?" "No, just knocked out. He will wake up with a headache and some bruised ribs, but he will live." Owen tied both horses to the rail and came up the steps to her. "I am sorry you have to see him like this. I know he is still your father despite everything." "He stopped being my father the night he burned me," Penelope said coldly. "What are you going to do with him?" "I am going to let him wake up. And then I'm going to put him back on this horse and escort him personally to the town limits. I have already spoken to the sheriff. If your father sets foot in Snake River again, he will be arrested. And I made it very clear to every man in that saloon that you are my wife and under my protection, and anyone who helps your father will answer to me." "Your wife?" Penelope felt her heart skip. "But we have not married." Owen reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Opening it, he revealed a simple gold band. "I was going to do this properly, take you into town for dinner, maybe get down on one knee. But circumstances being what they are, I am going to ask you now. Penelope Jensen, will you marry me? Not because of any arrangement or practical necessity, but because I love you. Because you have become the best part of my days, and I cannot imagine my life without you in it." Tears sprang to Penelope's eyes. "You love me?" "I do. Completely and honestly." "I love you too," she whispered. "Yes, Owen. Yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that was deeper and more passionate than any they had shared before. Penelope melted into him, pouring all her feelings into the kiss, all her love and gratitude and hope for their future. A groan from the horse interrupted them. Her father was beginning to stir. Owen's expression hardened. "Stay inside, Penelope. You do not need to face him." "No," she said firmly. "I want to. I want him to see that I am not afraid anymore, that he has no power over me." Owen studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, but I'm right here with you." They walked down the steps together as Peter Jensen's eyes fluttered open. He looked around in confusion, then focused on Penelope. His face twisted with rage. "You ungrateful wretch," he snarled. "I came all this way to bring you home, and this is how you repay me, by having your man attack me?" "You drew on him first, Monoin," Penelope said, her voice steady. "Do not pretend to be the victim here. You burned me, father. You hurt me because I wanted to read a book. You drove me away with your cruelty." "I was teaching you discipline, teaching you your place." "No, you were trying to break me, but you failed." She held up her hand, showing the ring. "I am married now. This is my home, and these are my people. You have no claim on me, no right to be here. Owen is going to escort you out of town, and if you ever come back, you will be arrested. And if you somehow get past that and try to hurt me again, you will have to deal with him." She gestured to Owen, who stood beside her like a wall of muscle and determination. Her father looked at him, seemed to measure the cold promise in his eyes, and something in his expression shifted. It was not quite fear, but it was close. "You will regret this," Peter spat. "Both of you." "The only thing I regret is not leaving sooner," Penelope said. "Goodbye, father. I hope I never see you again." Owen untied him from the saddle but kept a firm grip on his arm. "Get on your horse. You are coming with me, and I am watching you get on that stage heading east. And if I ever hear you have been bothering my wife again by letter or telegram or in person, I will come find you, and I will not be as gentle as I was today." Her father must have seen the truth in Owen's words because he did not argue. He mounted his horse with shaking hands, and Owen swung up onto his own mount. "I will be back before dark," Owen told Penelope. "Lock the door." She watched them ride away, her father hunched and defeated in his saddle, Owen straight and protective beside him. When they disappeared from view, she went inside and sat down at the kitchen table, her hands shaking with delayed reaction. It was over. Her father had come and gone, and she was still here, still safe. Owen had protected her, had stood up for her, had called her his wife in front of the whole town. They had not had a ceremony yet, but in every way that mattered, she was already his. Owen returned as the sun was setting, looking tired but satisfied. "He is on the evening stage east. I stood there and watched it leave, made sure he was on it. The driver has instructions not to let him off until they are well out of Idaho." Penelope went to him, and he wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. They stood like that for a long time, taking comfort in each other's presence. "Let us get married properly," Owen said into her hair. "This week. I do not want there to be any question about your status, any loophole he might try to exploit. I want you to be my wife in the eyes of the law and God and everyone in this territory." "Yes," Penelope agreed. "I want that too." They were married 3 days later in a simple ceremony at the church in Snake River. Penelope wore a dress of deep blue that Owen had purchased for her from the general store, and she carried a bouquet of late-blooming wildflowers that Mac and Charlie had picked that morning. Owen wore his best suit, his hair freshly cut, his face shaved smooth. The ceremony was brief, witnessed by a handful of townspeople who had come to welcome Penelope properly into the community. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife and Owen kissed her, Penelope felt as though her heart might burst with happiness. They held a small celebration at the ranch afterward with food and music and laughter. Mac played the fiddle surprisingly well, and Owen swept Penelope into a dance on the porch, spinning her until she was breathless and laughing. As the sun set and their guests began to leave, Penelope found herself standing with Owen's arm around her waist, watching the sky turn brilliant shades of orange and pink. "Happy?" Owen asked. "Happier than I ever thought I could be," she answered honestly. That night they truly became husband and wife. Owen was gentle with her, patient and caring, making sure she was comfortable every step of the way. Penelope had been nervous, uncertain, but Owen's tenderness made everything feel natural and right. When they lay together afterward, her head on his chest and his arms around her, she felt completely safe and completely loved. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me," Owen murmured into her hair. "I could never regret you," Penelope said. "You saved me, Owen. Not just from my father, but from a life of fear and hiding. You gave me back myself." "You saved yourself," he corrected. "You were brave enough to leave, strong enough to survive. I just had the good fortune to be here when you arrived." The autumn passed in a blur of happiness. Penelope threw herself into making the ranch truly feel like home, adding small touches of comfort and beauty wherever she could. She made curtains for all the windows, braided rugs for the floors, planted bulbs in the garden that would bloom come spring. Owen taught her to ride properly, and they spent Sunday afternoons exploring the rangeland together, riding up into the foothills to see the aspens in their full autumn glory. He showed her his favorite spots, the places where he went when he needed to think or find peace, and Penelope felt honored that he was sharing these private places with her. In November, the first real snow came, blanketing everything in white. Penelope stood at the kitchen window, watching the flakes fall, and felt Owen's arms come around her from behind. "Beautiful, is it not?" he said. "It is, though I confess I'm glad to be inside where it is warm." He chuckled, his breath warm against her ear. "Wait until January. This is nothing compared to what winter can bring here." But Penelope found she was not frightened by the prospect. With Owen beside her, with a solid house and full larders and warmth and love, she could face whatever winter might bring. Christmas arrived, and Penelope made the house festive with evergreen boughs and candles. She baked pies and cookies, and Owen surprised her with a beautiful shawl he had ordered from a catalog, deep green wool embroidered with flowers. "It is beautiful," she said, running her fingers over the delicate stitching. "Owen, you should not have spent so much." "You deserve beautiful things," he said simply. "Besides, I wanted you to have something that would not press against your shoulders. I know they still pain you sometimes in the cold." It was such a thoughtful gesture that Penelope felt tears prick her eyes. Owen was always thinking of her comfort, always mindful of her needs. They spent Christmas Day quietly, just the two of them, exchanging gifts and eating a special dinner that Penelope had been preparing for days. That evening, sitting by the fire, Owen reading aloud from a book of poetry while Penelope sewed, she felt a contentment so profound it was almost frightening in its intensity. "What are you thinking?" Owen asked, noticing her smile. "Just that I'm grateful for all of this, for you," He set down the book and pulled her onto his lap, kissing her thoroughly. I am the grateful one. You have made this house a home, Penelope. You have made my life complete. January did indeed bring serious snow, storms that piled drifts high against the house and made venturing outside a challenge. But Penelope and Owen were well prepared with plenty of supplies laid in and animals secured in the barn. They spent the long winter evenings playing cards, reading, talking, making love by the warmth of the fire. It was during one of these storms that Penelope realized she had missed her monthly courses, twice now. She said nothing at first, not wanting to raise hopes if she was wrong. But as the days passed and certain signs became undeniable, she knew she needed to tell Owen. She chose a quiet evening when the storm had finally passed and the world outside was calm and beautiful under a full moon. They were sitting together on the sofa, Owen's arm around her when she took his hand and placed it over her still flat stomach. I am with child, she said softly. We are going to have a baby. Owen went very still. Then he turned to look at her, his eyes shining with emotion. Truly? Truly, I think it will be born in late summer. He let out a whoop of joy that made her laugh, then pulled her into his arms, holding her as though she were the most precious thing in the world. A baby. We are having a baby. Are you happy? She asked, though his reaction made the answer clear. Happy does not begin to cover it. He pulled back to look at her, his hands framing her face. You have given me everything, Penelope, a home, a partnership, love, and now a child. I do not have words for how much that means to me. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the rest of the winter and into spring. Owen was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly worrying about whether Penelope was doing too much, eating enough, getting enough rest. She found his concern endearing, though she had to remind him regularly that she was not made of glass. In April, as the snow melted and the first green shoots appeared in the garden, they prepared the second bedroom to become a nursery. Owen built a beautiful cradle from pine, sanding it smooth and rubbing it with oil until it glowed. Penelope sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her heart full as she imagined the baby who would wear them. Summer arrived with its heat and long days, and Penelope grew round with the baby. By August, she was large and uncomfortable, ready to meet the child she had been carrying. The baby arrived on a hot night in late August, a long labor that left Penelope exhausted but triumphant. The midwife from town, a capable woman named Mrs. Harris, placed the squalling infant in Penelope's arms. You have a son, she said with a smile. Penelope looked down at the red-faced baby and felt her heart expand impossibly. A son, she whispered. Owen, who had been pacing outside the bedroom door throughout the labor, was allowed in. He approached the bed with something like awe on his face, staring at the tiny person in Penelope's arms. He is perfect, Owen said, his voice rough with emotion. You are perfect. Thank you, Penelope. Thank you for this gift. They named him Oliver, and he became the center of their world. Owen proved to be a devoted father, getting up for nighttime feedings, changing diapers without complaint, spending hours simply holding his son and marveling at him. Penelope watched her husband with their child and fell even more deeply in love with him. This gentle giant of a man, so tender with their baby, so patient and loving. She had never imagined such happiness was possible. The years that followed were full and rich. Oliver grew from infant to toddler to young boy, full of energy and curiosity. When he was 3, Penelope gave birth to a daughter they named Patricia, who had her mother's dark blonde hair and her father's blue-gray eyes. 2 years after that came another son, Oscar, who proved to be the most mischievous of the 3. The ranch prospered under Owen's careful management, and the house rang with the sounds of children's laughter. Penelope's burns faded to silvery scars that only Owen ever saw, and the memories of her old life receded until they seemed like something that had happened to someone else. She never heard from her father again. She did not know if he had returned to wherever he had come from or if he had died, and she found she did not care. That chapter of her life was closed, and she had no desire to reopen it. One evening in late summer, when Oliver was 10, Patricia 7, and Oscar 5, Penelope stood on the porch watching her children play in the yard while Owen finished up some work in the barn. The sun was setting, painting everything in golden light, and the air smelled of hay and sage and growing things. Owen came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on top of her head. It was a familiar embrace, one they had shared countless times over the years. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how far we have come," Penelope said. "I was just remembering that day I arrived so frightened and hurt, not knowing what kind of life I was stepping into. If someone had told me then that this would be my future, I would not have believed them." "I would not have either," Owen admitted. "I thought I was just getting a practical arrangement, someone to help run the household. I had no idea I was getting the love of my life." Penelope turned in his arms to face him. After all these years, after 3 children and countless days and nights together, he could still make her heart flutter with such words. "I love you, Owen Jenkins," she said, "more than I ever thought it was possible to love another person. And I love you, Penelope Jenkins." He kissed her softly, sweetly. "Thank you for taking a chance on a lonely cowboy." "Thank you for dressing my burns and never asking why," she countered. "Thank you for seeing past the hurt to the person underneath. Thank you for giving me a life worth living." "You gave me the same," Owen said. "We saved each other." As the sun dipped below the mountains and their children's laughter rang out in the cooling air, Penelope realized that was exactly right. They had saved each other, 2 broken people who had found wholeness together. And in doing so, they had built something beautiful and lasting, a love that would endure for all the years to come. The children came running up to the porch then, breathless and excited, begging for one more game before bedtime. Owen laughed and chased after them, his long legs eating up the ground while they shrieked with delight. Penelope watched them, her hand resting unconsciously over her stomach where she suspected another child was beginning to grow, though she had not yet told Owen. She would tell him soon, she decided, but for now she simply wanted to stand here and appreciate this moment, this life, this family they had built together from nothing but hope and love and determination. As darkness fell and Owen herded the protesting children inside for baths and bedtime stories, Penelope took one last look at the ranch spread out before her. This place had become her sanctuary, her haven, her home in every sense of the word. The scars on her shoulders were a permanent reminder of where she had come from, but they no longer defined her. She was Penelope Jenkins now, wife of Owen, mother of 3 soon to be 4, mistress of a prosperous ranch in the beautiful Snake River Valley. She was loved and safe and valued. She was home. And as she went inside to join her family, closing the door behind her on the star-filled night, she sent up a silent prayer of thanksgiving for the mail-order bride advertisement she had answered so many years ago, for the courage to escape her old life, and most of all for the cowboy who had dressed her burns without asking why, who had seen her worth when she could barely see it herself, who had loved her into wholeness. Their story had started with pain and fear, but it had blossomed into something beautiful. And there, in that small ranch house in Idaho, surrounded by the people she loved most in the world, Penelope knew with absolute certainty that she had found her happily ever after. The years continued to roll by with the easy rhythm of a life well lived. The 4th child Penelope had suspected turned out to be twin girls, born during a spring snowstorm when Oliver was 11. Owen had ridden through the storm to fetch Mrs. Harris, arriving back just in time for the births. They named the twins Opal and Pearl, and Owen joked that they had evened out the numbers, 3 boys and 3 girls. The ranch expanded as the children grew. Oliver showed an early aptitude for working with horses and took over much of that responsibility as he entered his teenage years. Patricia proved to have a head for numbers and began helping Penelope keep the ranch accounts. Oscar was the most social of the children, always making friends, always organizing games and adventures. When Oliver turned 18, Owen deeded him a portion of the ranch land to start his own operation. It was emotional for both parents to watch their firstborn step into manhood, but they were proud of the capable, kind young man he had become. "You raised him well," Owen said to Penelope the night after Oliver moved into the small house they had built on his section of land. "We raised him well," she corrected. "Everything good in our children comes from both of us." Patricia married at 19 to a school teacher who had moved to Snake River the year before. It was a small wedding at the ranch, with half the town in attendance. Penelope cried happy tears as she watched her daughter pledge her life to a good man who clearly adored her. "She chose well," Owen observed, watching his daughter dance with her new husband. "She learned from the best example," Penelope said, squeezing his hand. Oscar eventually left to study law in Boise, determined to become a lawyer. The twins, inseparable as ever, showed early signs of wanting to be teachers like their brother-in-law. The house slowly emptied as each child found their path, but it was never lonely. There were always grandchildren visiting, children and spouses stopping by for dinner, the bustle and noise of a large, loving family. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Owen surprised Penelope with a trip to San Francisco. It was the first time either of them had been to such a large city, and they spent a week exploring, seeing sights, staying in a proper hotel with running water and electricity. "This is amazing," Penelope said, standing at the window of their hotel room, looking out at the lights of the city. "But I find myself missing home." "So do I," Owen admitted, coming to stand behind her. "Turns out we are ranch people through and through." They returned to Snake River with relief, both of them appreciating anew the quiet beauty of their valley, the peace of their life together. The children were grown now, launched into their own lives, but they returned often with their families, filling the house with noise and laughter. On a warm evening in September, 25 years after Penelope had first arrived in Snake River, she and Owen sat on their porch watching the sunset, as they had done thousands of times before. Penelope's hair was shot through with silver now, and Owen's face was more lined, but their love had only deepened with time. "Do you ever think about what your life might have been if you had not answered my advertisement?" Owen asked. Penelope considered the question. "Sometimes. But I cannot imagine any version of my life that does not include you, so it always feels like a theoretical exercise. You are woven into every part of who I am now." "That is exactly how I feel," Owen said. He took her hand, his thumb rubbing over her knuckles in the familiar gesture he had been doing for decades. "You know, people in town still talk about how I dressed your burns that first week and never asked why. They think it is romantic." "It was romantic," Penelope said. "It was the kindest thing anyone had ever done for me. You saw me at my most vulnerable, my most broken, and you responded with nothing but compassion. That was when I started falling in love with you, I think, in those quiet moments in my bedroom while you tended my wounds." "I was already half in love with you from your letters," Owen confessed. "You wrote with such honesty, such hope, despite everything you had been through. When I saw you step off that stage looking so brave and so scared at the same time, something in my chest just knew. You were mine to protect, to cherish, to love." "And you have done all those things," Penelope said, "every single day for 25 years. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky turn from blue to pink to purple. In the distance, they could hear cattle lowing and the evening songs of birds settling in for the night. It was the soundtrack of their life together, familiar and beloved. "I do not have any regrets," Owen said suddenly, "about anything in my life. Every choice I made, good or bad, led me to that day when I placed an advertisement for a mail-order bride, led me to you." "I have only one regret," Penelope said. Owen looked at her in surprise. "What is that?" "That I did not leave my father's house sooner. That I wasted years being afraid when I could have been here, with you, building this life. But then you might not have been on that particular stage, on that particular day, Owen pointed out. The timing might have been different, and we might never have found each other. Then I suppose I do not regret it after all, Penelope said with a smile, because finding you was worth every scar, every moment of fear, every hard thing I endured. You were the destination worth reaching. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Penelope thought about the girl she had been. Stepping off that stage 25 years ago with burns hidden beneath her clothes and terror hidden in her heart. She thought about how Owen had seen past all of that to the person she could become, given safety and love and time to heal. The burns had faded to faint silver lines that only showed in certain lights. The fear had faded even more completely, replaced by the deep security of knowing she was loved and valued. And the life she had built here, in this beautiful valley with this remarkable man, had exceeded every dream she had dared to dream during those dark days before her escape. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" Owen asked. "For everything. For being the man you are. For loving me. For giving me this life." Owen pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong against her. "Thank you for the same," he said. "You made me whole, Penelope. You made everything better." They stayed there on the porch until the moon rose silver and full over the mountains, and when they finally went inside, it was hand in hand, as they had done every night for 25 years, and as they would continue to do for all the years still to come. The mail-order bride with burns on her shoulders had found her home, and the cowboy who dressed them without asking why had found his heart's desire. Together they had built something that would outlast them both, a legacy of love, a family of good people, and a story that would be told for generations to come in the Snake River Valley. It was a story of pain transformed into healing, of fear transformed into courage, of loneliness transformed into love. It was a story that proved that sometimes the bravest thing a person could do was trust again, love again, hope again. And it was a story that, even as the years passed and the world changed around them, remained fundamentally unchanged in its truth. That love, real and lasting love, had the power to heal even the deepest wounds and transform even the darkest pasts into the brightest futures. Penelope and Owen Jenkins lived out their days in the house they had made together, surrounded by the family they had created, secure in the knowledge that they had found in each other everything they had ever needed. And when they were gone, their children and grandchildren would tell their story of how a desperate woman and a lonely cowboy had found each other across the miles and built a love that lasted a lifetime. It was, in the end, the kind of love story that gave people hope. Proof that no matter how dark the past, the future could always be brighter with the right person by your side.